Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in.
Happy Thursday, everybody. We begin today's episode with two very different meetings in two very different capitals. Yesterday, Wednesday, Japanese Prime Minister Kishida met with US President Biden for bilateral talks in Washington. At a news conference after the talks, Kishida said the world faced a, quote, historical turning point, end quote, and that the leaders had agreed to, quote, continue to respond to challenges concerning China, end quote, and would, quote, resolutely defend and bolster a free and open Indo-Pacific, end quote. Biden announced that the US and Japan plan to modernize their military command and control structures in the, quote, most significant upgrade, end quote, to their alliance since it was created decades ago. Biden added that the US, Japan, and Australia would create an, quote, air, missile, and defense architecture for the first time, end quote. He added that the US and Japan were planning to hold a trilateral military exercise with the UK too. It was also announced that the two sides would jointly develop technology and increase intelligence sharing. UK-based Financial Times, reporting on the meeting, explains that the summit comes as, quote, Japan has made a dramatic shift in its security policy, driven by aggressive Chinese activity and Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which has served as a reminder of the threat of conflict, end quote. Shyla Smith, a Japan expert and senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, told the outlet that a step change has been made in how Japan deals with global issues, saying it now, quote, wants to make a difference, end quote, adding, quote, Tokyo no longer watches quietly from the sidelines as North Korea, China, and now Russia attempt to change the status quo. Japan's leaders now recognize the danger of inaction. Their aim is to ensure no one will discount Japan's strength, end quote. As a quick aside, while we're in Washington, yesterday it was also announced that the United States is adding 4 Chinese companies to an export blacklist for seeking to acquire AI chips for China's military. The companies are Lingzhou Beijing Technology Co., Xi'an Like Innovation Information Technology Co., Beijing Anwise Technology Co., and Sinton Holy Tianjin Co. Another Chinese company, Shenzhen Jiasibo Technology Co., was added for being part of a network procuring aerospace components, including drone applications, for an aircraft company in Iran. The Federal Register notice said, quote, these components are used to develop and produce Shahid series UAVs, which have been used by Iran to attack oil tankers in the Middle East and by Russia in Ukraine, end quote. Meanwhile, there is a second meeting we need to cover, which was also held yesterday. In Beijing, General Secretary Xi Jinping met with former Taiwanese President Ma Ying-jeou. Formerly head of the KMT, at the last election, the party had to distance itself from Ma due to concerns that his language was getting too close to pro-Beijing positions. Ma's meeting with Xi yesterday was a big PR victory for Beijing. Ma told Xi that adhering to the 1992 consensus and opposing Taiwan independence, quote, constitute the common political foundation for the peaceful development of cross-strait relations, end quote. Ma also appealed to racial solidarity, noting that people on both sides of the strait, quote, belong to the Chinese nation and are descendants of Emperor Yan and the Yellow Emperor, end quote. However, recent polling in Taiwan shows that only a vanishingly small percentage of the public, roughly 2.4%, regard themselves as purely Chinese, as opposed to Taiwanese or some other variations. Zhu Songling, a Taiwan affairs specialist at Beijing Union University, speaking to state media, said the meeting sent, quote, an important message from Beijing, showing its determination to solve the Taiwan issue peacefully, end quote. Indeed, this meeting comes on the same day as the 45th anniversary of the enactment of the U.S.-Taiwan Relations Act, which has governed ties between Washington and Taipei since the U.S. formally switched its diplomatic recognition to Beijing in 1979, suggesting that Beijing wanted to send a message to Washington. Although the Biden and Kishida meeting on this anniversary too to discuss greater military cooperation perhaps suggests that Washington is also sending Beijing a strong message. Amanda Xiao, the senior analyst for China with Brussels-based International Crisis Group, argues that China's, quote, immediate focus is to push the incoming Lai administration to adopt a more accommodating political stance on cross-strait relations. Ma's visit helps to underscore Beijing's position that cross-strait dialogue is conditioned on acceptance of the idea that the two sides of the strait belong to one China, end quote. She added in a separate statement, quote, what they're saying is, We have not lost the hearts and minds of the Taiwanese people. There remains cultural and historical connections that bind us. This is Beijing telling its people we remain in control of the Taiwan situation and unification is still possible. End quote. Yesterday, a spokesperson for the Taiwan Affairs Office of the State Council in Beijing attacked Taiwan's ruling DPP for, quote, consistently obstructing exchanges, end quote, and for having no goodwill. While the Ma meeting with Xi was a PR win for Beijing, especially domestically, the political significance is not especially strong. Quote, Ma may be a spent political force in Taiwan, but he is a vessel through which Xi can project a familial tone of calm and confidence about the Taiwan issue. I do think Xi is trying to signal that they want a lowering of tensions, at least until the DPP does something they find problematic, and that so long as there are people on Taiwan like Ma and the youth delegation who joined him on this tour, there is always the possibility of peaceful reunification. I do not think many people on Taiwan think that, but meetings like this can be useful if they can lower the temperature. End quote. Let me know in the comments below what you think of either or both of these meetings. And speaking of Taiwan, I will be in Taipei next Thursday, the 18th, and I will be holding a dinner for any subscribers who would like to attend. So if you're in Taipei and you would like to join me next Thursday evening, likely around 7 p.m., please send me an email at the channel email in the description below. Thank you to those who have already messaged me. I'll send details in the coming days. I look forward to seeing some of you in Taipei next week. Next up, we discuss the economy, and if you're enjoying today's episode, don't forget to hit the like button. Liking and subscribing are a big help. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are also in the description below for those who want to help keep the channel financially sustainable. I rely primarily on your support to keep going, and this allows me to produce videos every day. Thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. Next up, the Chinese economy. Yesterday, Wednesday, Fitch Ratings revised China's outlook to negative from stable, citing surging debt and the ongoing housing crisis as major concerns. The note observed, quote, wide fiscal deficits and rising government debt in recent years have eroded fiscal buffers from a ratings perspective. End quote. Financial markets were unfazed by the move. Financial markets are instead closely watching for some key indicators, including first quarter growth in the coming weeks, looking for clues about whether the economy has finally stabilized or not. Though even if stabilization occurs, this will only give policymakers some room to tackle China's large systemic issues, housing and local fiscal conditions. Some commentators have pushed back against the Fitch report, however. Quote, I think the agency has got the logic backwards. There are good debts and bad debts. At this stage, if the government expands its fiscal budget deficit, then it will actually improve the economic outlook. End quote. Others disagree, and this is an area of intense policy debate. Although the central government hasn't unleashed large-scale stimulus, the government debt-to-GDP ratio climbed 5.3 percentage points in 2023 to 55.9%, according to a report by the National Institute for Finance and Development, a state-backed think tank. Bloomberg writes that public debt was close to 80% of gross domestic product as of the middle of last year, roughly double the level of the mid-2010s. Quote, that's well below many advanced economies like Japan and the US, though relatively high for an emerging market. End quote. Plus, as we've seen in previous videos, hidden debt may bring total public debt to double this level. Most of this debt is domestically borrowed, and 1/3 of the banking system belongs to the government, so a crisis remains unlikely. The higher risk, of course, is long-term stagnation, as the system has to digest massive bad assets on its books. China's finance ministry yesterday said it regrets Fitch Ratings' downward revision of its outlook for the economy, adding that the ratings agency's criteria can't effectively reflect fiscal policy's positive role in driving the nation's economic growth and stabilizing its debt-to-GDP ratio. The Fitch report noted in its commentary that China's fiscal deficit will likely widen due to greater government stimulus to offset economic headwinds, and projected a 7.1% deficit ratio for this year, the highest since the pandemic in 2020, when the entire country had been locked down. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a great Thursday, and I will see you all tomorrow.